Welcome back to Analysis, where we're looking at the general election in India, which saw the BJP's Narendra Modi propelled into power. US President Barack Obama telephoned Modi to congratulate him on the victory, whilst British Prime Minister David Cameron tweeted a congratulatory message. In this part of the programme, we explore what the election result will mean for India's relations with its neighbours and the West. Will the BJP victory place a strain on relations with Pakistan? Will Islamist movements in the region be galvanized by Modi's victory? And what effect will his victory have on relations with China, Europe, and the USA? Joining my studio guests from the first half, we now have Sunny Hundal, a journalist and lecturer at Kingston University, by Skype from Washington, Sean Derns, who's senior analyst at Global Risk Insights. Welcome to you both, Sunny and Sean. In fact, let me start with you, Sunny. What do you think his victory does mean in relations with Pakistan particularly?
Well, several things. I think one of them will be that they will talk a lot more tougher with Pakistan. That's always been the case with the BJP. So even just the other day, I saw a video of a senior BJP leader saying that unless Pakistan reins back its terrorist groups, that they will take much tougher action. And then it went into a war of words, and they started talking about nuclear weapons. And the BJP can be very irresponsible when it comes to talk like this. And also, I think that they will also take a much tougher line. They might stop trade or even certainly movement of people between India and Pakistan if they think that the Pakistani government is not doing enough to deal with terrorism. Or they might go further and start putting more troops on the border with Pakistan just to rally their base. I mean, they know that this kind of talk fires up their own base. They know that this kind of talk is what their voters like. And so they might do some of that, and that's what I'm worried about. But there is another side to this, which is that Modi himself will try and focus much more on the economy initially rather than foreign policy, I believe. So that means that if the economy goes well, then they will be less willing to start talking tough with Pakistan and the United States and China, and they will focus on getting things done at home because that will boost his popularity. If, however, the economy does not start doing well and there are other problems that occur and he starts getting mired in scandals, that's the time then he will be more tempted, and people within his party will be tempted to start doing this sort of tough talk in order to distract from their own failings domestically. And that's the worry over the medium term.
Well, Sean Derns in Washington, I mean, I believe there's a ban on Modi actually entering the United States. I mean, that surely has to be lifted now, doesn't it? I mean, the US must want relations with the new Prime Minister.
Yeah, that you can expect that ban. As a Prime Minister, as the head of state, he'll be having an A1 visa. So the ban will not actually affect his ability to travel into the United States. And certainly, as you saw with the call that President Barack Obama placed recently to the incoming Prime Minister, beginning a dialogue and strategic partnership is something that Washington has high hopes for with India and with the BJP-led government.
The sound quality of your Skype is not brilliant. We'll try and get back to you and improve that as the program goes on. Let me come back to Dr. Vittorini. I believe that Modi or some of his people suggested that the no first strike pledge on nuclear weapons might be changed because his policy is India first. Is that really a serious possibility? It would be very worrying, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think, it is. It will be very worrying. I'm not sure if that was like a posture, electoral posture, as it was suggested before, that it was used to kind of garner a certain degree of support among the kind of hardcore supporters of the BJP. I think, again, that the economy will be the priority for Modi. A stable environment, a stable South Asian environment, regional environment is important for India's economy to flourish and continue to grow. It is growing. It didn't grow as much as it did in the past. So improving relationships with Pakistan and the rest of the region will be the priority, and creating this stability. So it might be early to say at the moment. To see, obviously, Modi's position might change depending on what type of challenges will happen in the near future.
What do you feel about the nuclear issue?
Well, he actually wrote back on that. So someone suggested that this might be dumped, but then Modi himself made a statement saying that he wanted to keep the no first strike rule with Pakistan. So I don't think that, I mean, he himself during the campaign didn't say anything about foreign policy, rarely said anything about foreign policy, rarely said anything about even the Gujarat riots or anything like that. He stuck purely to the economy and governance, and that's what his focus is.
Well, didn't you also make some comments about Kashmir, about abolishing the relative autonomy that Kashmir has at the moment?
Yeah, he said something about that, but I mean, again, that's domestic policy. What I mean is that, you know, in the sense that he hasn't focused on what the relationships will be with the United States, the UK, China, or Pakistan, more in broader terms. They didn't, the BJP manifesto itself didn't say anything about, really, barely said anything about foreign policy. And yes, domestically, they will talk tough, including, for example, having a civil union code, a standard one across the country, rather than having people of different religions have different civil codes for marriage and divorce, etc., etc. So, but whether that happens is debatable, because when they actually start doing it, then the states might reject it, or there will be other roadblocks in between. So I think for the time being, he will focus entirely on the economy and governance, because he knows that's the best way to keep his popularity up and you have political capital. If that doesn't do well, then everything else starts to crumble.
What about, I just wanted to bring...
Can I just say that, I mean, Congress was seen as very weak in terms of dealing with Pakistan and the insurgency and the killing of Indian soldiers. And I think the fact that Modi has come in so strongly should actually send a very strong message to Pakistan that, they have a big responsibility to stop the insurgents coming across the border. Rather than, I think, worrying too much about what Modi might do, I think Pakistan actually needs to take a lesson from what's been done in the past and what won't be acceptable in the future.
Well, how has Pakistan actually reacted to the victory? Have they also sent telegrams of congratulations?
I believe that they have, and I believe that they are sending strong messages of their goodwill. But goodwill and those words are not necessarily enough if it's not backed up by making sure that security prevails.
I mean, the previous BJP Prime Minister, who we talked about in the first part of the program, Vajpayee, he also actually went to Pakistan and signed some kind of peace agreement. So BJP can deal with Pakistan in a normal way.
In fact, one of the few things that Modi did say during his lecture campaign with respect to the foreign policy is be inspired by Vajpayee's foreign policy of, I think it was Shakti and Shanti. I think he used those words, of strength and peace at the same time. In fact, it's quite interesting that after Vajpayee traveled to Lahore, Pakistan and India had this proxy war and Kargil. So, but at the same time, it was a period where India's-Pakistani relationship were going forward. That period is considered one of good relationship between India and Pakistan, whilst as it was just suggested, the 10 Congress years, and particularly the last 5 years of government, were a period where India-Pakistan relations stalled. So Pakistan is looking forward to catching up and bringing their relationships on the road again.
Let me come back to Sean Derns. I hope the connection now is a little bit better. I mean, Barack Obama's started this famous pivot to Asia. That always seemed to imply China and US-Chinese relations were the crucial thing. Also Japan, of course. I mean, is India really seen as terribly important in Washington?
Certainly. I think that there's been a long-held hope, Jonathan, that on the part of Washington to engage India as a strategic partner with the rise of China and the so-called Asia pivot. I think that largely thus far, for a variety of reasons, those hopes have been unfulfilled. And I also think that you've seen, certainly in the last year or two, Washington partners not really pursuing as actively as they previously were the hope of a strategic partnership. I think there's been a bit of stagnation in U.S.-Indian relations, complicated, of course, by the recent diplomat spat in New York.
But what does strategic partnership mean? I mean, these phrases are thrown out. I mean, do Americans see China as increasingly a threat and India as some kind of ally against that threat? I mean, what does it all mean?
Well, I would not say that. I certainly can't speak for all Americans, but I would not say that Americans see China as a threat. However, as we see with recent actions in the South China Sea, territorial disputes with as recent as last week with Vietnam, there's increasing worries, seems to be, in Washington regarding the rise of China. And I think that there's long been a hope to actively engage India, not just insofar as U.S. Sino-American relations are concerned, but as far as India being a larger stakeholder in the international community.
Sunny Handal, we haven't mentioned Russia. I mean, Russia's traditionally had very good relations with India and sold a lot of weaponry and stuff, of course. Now that Russia is being treated much more in the West as a potential enemy, is India relevant in that sort of new triangle emerging?
It is. I mean, Russia has been a strong ally since even going before 1984. And in 71, for example, when Indira Gandhi invaded East Pakistan to liberate Bangladesh, Russia was the one that, said that we'll stand by you, while the United States asked them to pull back. So ever since then, there's been a growing relationship. Ever since the Soviet Union days, there's been a strong relationship between India and the Russia, Soviet Union. So now I would say that India is not going to get involved in the way that the United States wants necessarily. So, they also get oil from Russia. They do a lot of deals with them, trade. So if the United States says, please don't work with Russia, India is going to say, this is not any of our concern. You have your own issues. We have our own issues. In that West sense, they're going to take a China stance, which is, don't get us involved. You do your own thing, and we will maintain trade and relations with Russia.
In fact, has Modi said anything particular about Ukraine and Russia and Crimea? No. Nothing.
Rarely anything. I mean, as far as I know, they haven't said anything, and they won't take a stance against Russia, as far as I know, because still, though Indians like working with the United States and they see the United States positively, they're not gonna. They also like Russia. They like Russia, and they like the the previous Soviet Union positively. So they're not going to work against them. In the same way, actually, like Iran, India never really took a strong stance against Iran. Because it's worked with Iran, it's had historical links with Iran, and India never really.
So on these issues, the BJP will be pretty much the same as the Congress Party, no different.
Certainly against Russia. They might take a stronger stance against Iran, but they won't against Russia, I believe.
And what about Afghanistan? I mean, very important country, and potentially could be quite a lot of turmoil there as the foreign troops pull out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a hot region that it preoccupies India quite a lot. That's why they have invested in development in Pakistan. I don't think the games will change that much with Modi in government. In terms of also going back to what we were saying just now, economic diplomacy will be, the economic aspect of diplomacy will be the driver of the new diplomacy coming from this new government.
Okay, thank you very much. On that note, economic progress and activity will dominate, and foreign policy to some extent will be secondary. We have to close the program. We've come to the end of this episode, so I'd like to thank my guests and, of course, you at home for watching. Please tune in again for future discussions on Islam Channel. Don't forget that you can keep up with the discussion by following us on Twitter at the address below on your screen, or by following Islam Channel Current Affairs on Facebook. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.